In a dramatic shift that's rattling Washington's corridors of influence, members of Congress are taking a firm stand against unlimited use of military force. This shows that even in deeply split times, the Constitution still has the power to bring people together. Tonight, we're examining a powerful bipartisan development that's curbing presidential overreach and protecting the country from getting locked into perpetual fighting. Stick around while we explain precisely how 60 senators came together to approve this significant cross-party action. In a remarkable example of unity across party lines, something we haven't seen much lately, exactly 60 U.S. senators voted yes on comprehensive legislation meant to tightly limit the president's ability to start or keep up military attacks on Iran. That number carries real meaning on its own. Hitting 60 votes went far past the basic majority needed to pass, and it cleared the 40-vote hurdle that so often stops tough foreign policy bills in today's divided Senate. The broad backing revealed that a large portion of the Senate, including Democrats, Republicans, and independents aligned with Democrats, had united behind one core belief: allowing the executive branch unrestricted power to begin or intensify armed conflict with Iran creates serious dangers for the Constitution, America's security, and the safety of troops serving in that part of the world. This legislation didn't come out of nowhere. It developed amid ongoing airstrikes and missile volleys that had already drawn U.S. troops into active roles supporting Israeli operations against Iranian nuclear sites, missile factories, supporting militias, and leadership structures. News reports showed American jets, unmanned aircraft, and ships taking part in several rounds of missions during the last 10 days. The White House first called these steps limited, protective, and balanced, but many critics saw them as the start of a broader, possibly endless war. Senators on both sides voiced serious worry that the claimed legal grounds, mainly the president's commander-in-chief role under Article 2, plus wide readings of the post-9/11 military authorizations, were being pushed way beyond what Congress ever intended or agreed to. The vote stood out, especially because of how varied the supporting group was. Established progressive senators, long critical of military overreach, teamed up with conservative members who insist on following the Constitution, word for word in question. Broad presidential claims to war-making authority. Moderate Republicans from areas with big military populations added their support, worried that pushing ahead without clear approval from Congress would expose American service members to danger without proper Democratic backing. A few senators who once backed strong action against Iranian moves in the Gulf region or attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria now felt the situation called for a stop and careful discussion, not blind trust in decisions from the Oval Office. The process leading to the vote was carefully designed to draw attention and build momentum. After early committee reviews ended in strict party line splits, the bill's backers used a Senate procedure similar to a discharge petition, relying on Rule 13th to move it straight to the full floor. Debate ran for 3 full demanding days, filled with long speeches, votes on changes, and sharp exchanges that highlighted what was really at stake. Those in favor kept pointing to the clear wording in Article 1, Section 8, stressing that only Congress holds the power to declare war. They explained that ongoing heavy bombing combined with troop movements on the ground and naval restrictions in the Strait of Hormuz clearly qualified as hostilities under the 1973 War Powers Resolution. Those against the bill argued that current laws already gave enough flexibility and that restricting the president right now would strengthen Iran's position and harm quiet diplomatic efforts. In the end, those points didn't sway enough senators to stop the legislation. The final vote delivered a strong confirmation of Congress's proper role. 60 yes votes made up more than 3/4 of the Senate, a clear sign with deep political and constitutional importance. Backers quickly described the result as bringing back the proper balance between branches, which had weakened over many years of executive claims in the Middle East and other regions. They saw it as proof that the Senate can still act with strength and unity on fundamental issues of war and peace, even when it's often seen as stuck. The large majority also made a veto override less likely to be needed soon. Instead, it put heavy pressure on the administration to follow the new legal limit if it wanted to keep military actions going. At the center of this new law is a clear and firm ban. President Donald Trump is now prohibited by statute from ordering or approving any further bombing runs, missile launches, drone operations, or other direct military strikes targeting Iranian land, its armed forces, militias backed by Iran inside its borders, or related targets within Iran's territory, unless Congress first passes specific new permission for those steps. The wording was written to be wide-ranging and solid, sealing off loopholes that earlier presidents used to carry out strikes under old military authorizations or claimed inherent powers. Section 2 spells out plainly that no money given to the Defense Department or any other federal agency can be used or committed to support offensive military moves against Iran, except in two very limited cases. One case needs a brand new Iran-focused joint resolution approving military force, which would go through full discussion, possible changes, and separate votes in both the House and Senate. The other allows continuation only if Congress formally declares war on Iran using its Article 1 powers. Without one of those clear approvals, the ban takes effect the moment the law is signed and stays in force through the current presidential term, unless later changed or removed by new legislation. Importantly, the restriction goes further than just American planes or missiles. It covers any kind of assistance like sharing intelligence, providing targeting information, refueling and flight, supply, or allowing flights over U.S.-controlled areas that helps Allied forces carry out strikes on Iranian targets that would be banned if done directly by the U.S. The goal is obvious. Stop any attempts to get around the rules by using partners or calling it a joint effort to hide America's role. To make sure it's followed, the law requires the president to report every 48 hours on any U.S. military activity that might fit the banned category, plus fast-track options for Congress members to ask federal courts for quick orders to stop violations if they see the executive ignoring the rules. With this strong barrier in place, the 80-senator group aimed to stop the forward push of an air operation that had already caused major harm to Iranian military assets, while increasing the chance of counterattacks on U.S. bases, commercial ships, energy facilities around the Gulf, and possibly civilian areas. Members of Congress warned that keeping up one-sided bombing could pull America into a larger conflict, drawing in Hezbollah, Shia groups in Iraq, Houthi fighters in Yemen, and maybe direct Iranian missile strikes on Israel or American naval ships. So the law works both as a real limit on presidential choices and as a way to slow things down, pushing for a serious national discussion about the goals, expenses, dangers, and ethical questions of long-term military action against Iran before any more irreversible moves happen. This bill represents one of the strongest recent efforts by Congress to take back and firmly exercise the authority given only to it under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the power to declare war, issue letters of marque and reprisal, and set rules for captures on land and sea. For many years, lawmakers from both parties have expressed growing frustration as this core responsibility has slowly slipped away with one administration after another, regardless of party. Depending on broader and broader readings of Article 2, Commander-in-Chief powers, and old or repurposed military authorizations from unrelated situations to run major operations without coming back to Congress for new approval. This Iran measure directly challenges that habit by stating clearly in its opening and main parts that prolonged offensive bombing of a sovereign country counts as war-making power that belongs to elected representatives, not the president alone. During debate, those who introduced the bill often referred to the careful plans set by the Constitution's writers, citing Federalist Paper No. 45, where Alexander Hamilton described the president's commander role as much more restricted than a king's, mostly about leading forces after Congress had given the go-ahead or declared war. They compared that to today's situation. presidents launching repeated airstrikes, sending carrier groups into tense waters, and greenlighting special forces missions inside Iran based on loose ideas like protecting U.S. interests or preventing threats, all without any dedicated congressional discussion or vote on actual conflict with Iran. The bill's language makes it clear that these steps move beyond defensive measures or small responses into serious hostilities that require Congress's explicit authorization, putting back the division of war powers the founders created to avoid one-person decisions leading to long, costly wars. This push to restore balance stands out because it's presented not as a party fight, but as defense of the system itself. The 60-vote total proved that a large majority of senators, many who had earlier trusted executive calls on security issues, now saw the buildup of presidential war presidents as a serious challenge to the separation of powers. Lawmakers brought up past moments when Congress stepped in after executive oversteps: the 1973 War Powers Resolution after Vietnam, the Boland restrictions during Iran-Contra, and funding limits in Central America, debates in the 1980s. Today's law follows that tradition, directly referencing the Constitution while adapting tools to handle today's kind of warfare: precise airstrikes, cyber elements, and support for proxies, instead of classic large-scale invasions or formal war declarations. By using strong, clear statements throughout the text, Congress reaffirms, Congress exercises, Congress holds sole authority. The bill aims not just to stop the current operations, but to set a lasting standard for presidents to come. It rejects the idea that a president can start and maintain what is essentially a continuous air campaign by describing each individual strike as separate, small, or reactive. Instead, it views the overall pattern of repeated attacks, growing force, and expanding targets as one ongoing set of hostilities that needs clear, positive approval from Congress. This directly questions legal opinions from past Justice Department advisors who often set a high bar for what counts as hostilities under the War Powers Law, higher than many in Congress think the founders meant. The main working part of the law sets a strict future-focused ban without fresh and precise congressional permission. The president cannot direct, allow, or help in any way with further U.S. military strikes on any Iranian targets. The wording is careful to remove unclear spots that let past administrations claim certain actions didn't trigger legal or constitutional rules. Additional is defined broadly to cover not only brand new missions, but also continuing strikes, responses to Iranian countermoves, preemptive hits on possible dangers, and even actions called defensive if they deliver offensive force onto Iranian land, troops, or equipment inside Iran. The ban applies across all U.S. military tools: fighter and bomber planes from the Air Force and Navy, cruise missiles from ships or subs, armed drones run by the military or intelligence agencies, special forces, ground raids, and any future land-based missiles aimed at Iran. It includes combined cyber and physical attacks, plus electronic support that directly aids or guards bombing runs. To block the frequent tactic of leaning on allies, the law forbids giving any U.S. help that would make banned strikes possible by partner nations, including live targeting info, in-flight refueling, command data sharing, satellite links, and access to U.S. airspace or bases when used for attacks on Iran. The demand for clear congressional okay is just as tight. Permission has to come either through a new joint resolution or law specifically allowing military force against Iran with set goals, limits, and timeframes, or through a proper declaration of war passed by both chambers and sent to the president. General or leftover language from earlier authorizations like the 2001 against 9/11 perpetrators or the 2002 Iraq version is ruled out for Iran unless Congress specifically updates or expands them with Iran-focused wording. This stops the habit of pulling out old resolutions to cover new fights against countries never considered at the time. Accountability gets reinforced with several strong checks. The The law demands an immediate stop to any banned activity once signed with no carryover for ongoing missions, except very narrow cases of defending U.S. forces facing immediate attack. The President must send detailed reports, both secret and public, within 48 hours of any action that might qualify as prohibited, explaining the claimed legal reason, what was hit, and why it doesn't break the law. Any lawmaker can start fast court action to challenge suspected violations, with courts required to handle them urgently and assume the law is valid unless proven otherwise. Together, these create a tough wall against workarounds, making the ban a genuine, enforceable restriction instead of just words. The law clearly requires that any continued or increased military moves against Iran, beyond urgent self-defense, from direct attacks can only happen if Congress passes and the President approves a formal declaration of war under Article 1, Section 8. This brings back the classic constitutional process that's barely been used since World War II, treating ongoing bombing, naval restrictions, or wider targeting as actual war rather than minor policing or protection. Requiring a declaration makes lawmakers face the seriousness of open conflict through open discussion, recorded decisions, and clear national commitment, stopping the executive from sliding into long wars on loose or reused grounds. It rules out old authorizations as enough for Iran unless Congress adds specific new Iran-related terms. This raises the bar high, demanding careful, thoughtful steps before any more escalation can be legal. Once the law takes effect, it directs the President to immediately end all offensive actions and quickly pull back U.S. troops, planes, ships, special teams, and support equipment involved in unauthorized Iran-related hostilities. Unauthorized includes anything without new congressional permission or a war declaration covering present airstrikes, nearby deployed forces aiding attacks, intelligence tools for targeting, and supply lines keeping things going. The pullback order covers forces in or right next to Iranian territory or airspace, tied to banned activities with a firm schedule for leaving unless Congress decides otherwise. Narrow exceptions apply only to defensive setups guarding U.S. personnel from clear immediate danger, but even those need reporting and must be kept small. The goal is to break the cycle of attack and response, remove American involvement from escalation risks, and return to the previous state until clear legislative approval comes, lowering chances of wider conflict. The bill directly strengthens and activates key parts of the 1973 War Powers Resolution by labeling current and any future U.S. actions against Iran as hostilities that start the law's required reports and end dates. It requires the President to send a formal report to Congress within 48 hours of putting U.S. forces into situations with hostilities or likely hostilities with Iran, covering the situation, legal claims, expected size, and length. The legislation firmly rejects White House arguments that current strikes don't meet the hostilities level, stating instead that repeated airstrikes, missile use, and aid to Allied attacks do qualify. By using Section 5B, it starts a 60-day timer, plus 30 more if needed, for automatic force withdrawal unless Congress approves continuation via new law, war declaration, or extension. This pushes Congress to act quickly or forces a pullout, blocking open-ended executive campaigns without approval. The Senate's decision came amid rapidly growing military action as U.S. and Israeli units carried out joint airstrikes and missile attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities, missile sites, IRGC headquarters, and militia bases on several fronts during the previous 10 days. What began as targeted hits on enrichment plants grew to include air defenses, oil facilities, and guard commanders, leading to Iranian missile responses against Israeli areas and U.S. positions in Iraq and Syria. American F-35 fighters, B-2 stealth bombers, and carrier aircraft joined multiple attack waves with destroyers in the Gulf, offering protection and firing Tomahawks. The rising intensity sparked urgent worries about a bigger regional conflict, pulling in Hezbollah rockets, Houthi actions in the Red Sea, and possible shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, which fueled the cross-party drive to regain congressional oversight before more U.S. involvement or losses happened. Lawmakers, and those who backed it, praised the Senate's strong 80-vote approval as a significant win for constitutional principles, showing a rare, powerful return of Congress to its proper place in decisions about war and peace after long periods of executive lead. They described the bill as a needed fix for the risky slide toward one-person presidential wars, where leaders bypass Congress by stretching old approvals or claimed powers. Supporters highlighted how it brings back responsibility, forcing the executive to get and show clear congressional agreement before risking American lives and resources in prolonged fighting with Iran. The wide bipartisan support proved that protecting the balance of powers goes beyond party when basic constitutional rules are involved. Those in favor called it a warning to future presidents that Congress won't quietly accept gradual buildups presented as minor steps. They stressed that real responsibility means open discussion, recorded votes, and clear explanations, not just private updates or secret reasons, making sure elected representatives, not one position, carry the weight of deciding on war. In a time of sharp political division, the Senate's huge 80-vote yes showed an unusual and impressive show of unity on a major foreign policy issue. Bringing together progressives concerned about never-ending conflicts, conservatives focused on limiting executive power, and centrists worried about troop safety. This agreement stood out despite bitter splits on almost every home-run topic, proving that protecting the institution and handling war powers can still connect deeply divided groups. The solid results send a strong signal that most senators saw uncontrolled military buildup against Iran as too great a threat to the country's interests and constitutional system. Now that the Senate has moved with such force, focus turns right away to the House, where matching legislation or a similar measure needs to pass for this to become law. House leadership is under pressure to act fast with strikes continuing and tensions rising. Though opponents there might try to weaken, slow, or stop it with procedural moves or different ideas, the Senate step has therefore created a key next stage, putting responsibility on the House to either strengthen congressional control or let the current path go on without new limits. As we've covered, this important Senate vote goes well beyond stopping airstrikes. It's a strong move to reclaim constitutional limits and balance seen in the huge bipartisan group that overcame party deadlock and the firm rules preventing more strikes without clear permission or a formal war declaration. By bringing the 1973 War Powers Resolution into play during rising U.S.-Israeli actions, Congress called for quick withdrawal from unapproved fighting, presenting it as a victory for good government responsibility and unity in foreign affairs. With the House now set to consider it, this effort highlights Congress's essential job in blocking one-sided escalation, safeguarding American lives, and keeping democratic control over decisions about war. And that's the straight story from Reality USA Reports, cutting past the noise to bring you the real details that count. If this got you thinking about taking back our democratic process, hit subscribe right now to stand with us for openness and stay caught up on everything. Leave a comment. What do you think about Congress finally taking action to stop endless wars? Let's talk about it more.